Okay, so we're gonna have a little different video today. Some people will enjoy it, some people won't. There's this video that I've been wanting to watch. It's Destiny Debates, Conservatives on Trump, Sex, Gender, and Politics. We'll see how this goes. I'm just kind of gonna go through, let you peek inside my thought process and how I get the ideas to make my videos. So for those of you that know that I play poker or like some poker, there'll be some poker on the left. If you do enjoy this kind of content, want more of this, let me know. The only way to let me know is to watch it, comment on it, give me likes and all that good stuff. So let's get started. I guess I will speak on the format. I like the format of this video. Peter Boghossian, I just butchered that name, but I like how they have two groups of people. There's a question asked. There's these little circles that are around everybody, and they have to go stand into the spot that they feel. So you see agree, slightly agree, neutral, slightly disagree, and disagree, I believe. It's kind of blurred out. But I like this concept. I feel like it creates an environment that forces people to have to defend what they believe in and kind of stand on what they believe in. So just wanted to say that before we got into the video.
As per Trump's executive order, women need to be defended from gender ideology extremism. Move.
Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
James and David, step forward.
Okay, well, I'll just start on something that was recent based on the EOs, was women's sports, for example. Let's just go off the physical threats. We had the woman that got a concussion from a volleyball being spiked into her head by a trans-identified player. It literally had her hospitalized. We had another that had a skull fracture after being tackled in an MMA fight, also by a trans-identified male. So just based off of those examples, but in the sports example actually goes deeper than just the physical threat. There is also opportunity being removed from girls. What I've noticed, unfortunately, is that a lot of people that really are a part of the gender ideology don't really take sports seriously. It's not their vibe. It's not who they are, so they don't see it as something that's important. Yet sports is an avenue for girls to get into college, get amazing jobs, make all these networking and connections. It's more than just an after-school activity. So
Okay, let's.
Okay, so right off the bat, that's why I like this. It gets straight into it. You got your kid on the left that's obviously for protecting, not protecting women's sports rights, I believe. The guy that just spoke, I have realized and noticed too, and this doesn't say what side I'm on or if I'm on a side, but I have noticed that anyone that is for transgender people playing in sports, they usually don't play sports or haven't played sports. And I have noticed that when speaking to people. I did play sports. Of course, in my time, this was not something that was worried about, talked about. I will say this. Sports are important, like the gentleman just said there, but they are just sports, and I don't feel like they're important enough to take away rights from others. And that's where I'm kind of iffy on this whole thing. I think this just means there's going to be a change in the way sports are played, and it's just a transition into something that we have no clue that's going to happen yet. So if this is going to be something that is just the future of mankind, then we're just going to have to find a different way to have sports implemented if we want sports in our society. So I think a lot of people have a problem with change. Obviously, we've seen that throughout history. Is there's always people fighting against change. Everybody wants to keep their traditions, and everyone's traditions are usually more important than others, which turns into this kind of discrimination. And I think we just have to figure out, is sports more important, or is the current way sports are played more important than our society coming together and coming up with a solution?
All right, so first I'd like to address the claim that it's, I guess, more dangerous for women if trans women are competing in women's sports. There's been a lot of studies that have been done that have said that the, let's say, male advantage is basically eliminated after multiple years of hormone therapy, which I wouldn't be against mandating that as a rule to be able to participate as a trans person in women's sports. I'd also like to say that in those sports that you mentioned, volleyball and MMA, a risk of concussion or fractures, that's part of the sport. I mean, a cis woman could have also done that to a cis woman. It's not impossible to happen just because it's a trans woman.
Sure. But I'm not saying it's impossible if it's going to happen with two cis women competing against each other. The chances increase if the person you're competing against has a larger wingspan, which hormones will do nothing for, broader shoulders, larger lung capacity.
So let's say, what if that trans woman that was competing, what if she had gotten HRT or medically transitioned before she had hit male puberty? Would that be acceptable?
Well, that's kind of a double-edged sword because I don't believe in intervention prior to puberty on that end. But let's say if that already happened, which is the case for a lot of people, no, because I think it depends. It's a case-by-case basis because some men are 6 feet tall, some men are 5'2". So if they transition.
In this case, if they had taken puberty blockers and then HRT before the age of 18, they had not hit any stage of male puberty. That means they'd gone through an entirely female puberty, no male puberty at all. So they would have, outside of their primary sex characteristics, they'd be female. So is that not?
My question would be, why not just have a different league so that it's not complete, so it's not infringing on female sports? You know what I mean?
So when the NCAA,
I guess this is kind of going into what I stated. And once again, we don't know what the future is going to hold. There are going to be people that transition and there's not going to be anything you can do about it. So the future will be a different type of sports atmosphere. And that is just going to be the truth. People are going to have to learn to deal with it. And once again, I will say sports aren't more important than our society getting along and our civilization flourishing. Sports are a part of it, and sports do a lot, but we just gotta, it's kind of like you just have to balance it out. And some people are gonna get some things, others aren't, and that's just how societies work and how societies form. Right now we're going through something to where we are going away from what made us the way we are, what made us the US. So let's keep going.
Global A director, I believe, was interviewed by Congress. He said, there was 12 trans people competing in the NCAA, or it was less than 20, definitely. So what other league could we make for just these couple dozen even women?
Sure, let's take that at face value, but with the trends and projections going the way they are, it clearly won't stay that way. You know, every generation has more trans-identified and LGBT-identified people in it, like almost double every generation. So clearly it's gonna come to a head. So I think getting ahead of it and creating its own separate space would be better and safer. And I think one title being taken away from a female that deserve that title or deserve that medal is too much. And I think the UN just put out the study that 800 or 900 titles and or medals had been lost from women to trans-identified males. I think that's awful. I think that's horrible because that's life-changing for that person and they work their whole life and then it gets taken away. So
Okay, so in the interest of time, let's move on from sports to general like trans issues.
Bathrooms, yeah.
So, what is a woman?
Adult human female.
Okay, define female.
She has the female, she produces eggs.
Okay, so just that, nothing to do, no chromosomes. That you don't take that into account.
Well, you take that into account, but I know that chromosomes can come in a spectrum, and the thing is that I don't think the intersex argument is valid at all because that's a genetic abnormality. That does not mean that sex is on a spectrum, and usually every person who is intersex, which is also kind of a what's it called? It's not a good term. It's a little confusing. They usually lean one way or the other. And instead, what kids are being taught now is that people are born on some kind of spectrum completely, and you can be anything, when really we're talking about genetic.
All right, I feel like we kind of got into what his real feelings are, or why he feels the way he feels. And when you heard him say, our kids are taught they can be whatever they want, there was a little more feeling with that, and that's really what his issue is. It almost has nothing to do with the sports, and that's the thing I've noticed about these type of issues, especially around election time. When you ask somebody why they're voting for one side or the other, you hear these things like, oh, I care about this, I care about that, but then it's really that. He takes it personal that you're told that you can be whatever you want. How dare you? And you can hear that if you rewind this or if you watch this. I'll link this video in the description. You can see that he had some kind of feeling about that. He didn't like that. And that's really what's going on. It's emotional, not logical. Even though he will say some logical comments, he is really just basing all of his decisions off of the emotion that he feels when he is reminding of that statement he just made. Okay.
As per Trump's executive order, it is biological truth that there are only two sexes, male and female. Move.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Okay, so you come to the neutral, please, Stephen. You get to ask questions for 5 minutes.
I guess I'm kind of neutral on it because I feel like all categories at the end of the day have some form of like construction of them. Are you claiming, do you think there are more than two categories of sexes, or?
Yeah, I think that the existence of intersex people, as we had gotten into a little bit before, fundamentally means that there's between male and female in terms of sex.
What is intersex to you? Your definition of that, I guess?
So there's multiple definitions of intersex, but usually that would mean when someone's primary sex characteristics like genitalia are mixed, or it doesn't match their inner genitalia, or I would also like to put forward that it's not usually included in intersex, but trans people often have the way their brains are set up. You can see it in MRIs and MCATs and scans. Their brain matter is more likely, in structure, is more likely to correspond to that of the sex that they identify as rather than the sex that they were born as.
Okay. Would trans men or trans women be a third or fourth sex to you then, or?
I don't generally agree with the idea of sex in the first place because I think there's so many abnormalities that it should just exist on a spectrum.
Okay. What am I asking this guy? Fuck. Do you think that I feel like I already know all of his, because I don't even know what I would ask.
All right, let me do this too. We're going to swap out David and in Brett. Okay.
Okay. Brett I will fight with here. What does biological truth mean to you?
I don't think there's such a concept. There's biological knowledge. I can tell you about what the differences between sexually reproducing organisms happen to be. And in order for a sexual...
All right, before we get started, we got a guy that's using language. That means there's going to be there's going to be some science talk behind it. Let's see if he actually can speak well on the science of this. Maybe it's his foreign voice that gets it. Foreign voices get Americans all the time. We think people are smarter. All right, let's go.
reproducing organism to sexually reproduce. You would need the binary sexual male and female dichotomy. And the existence of these problematic cases, these edge cases, do not refute the existence of the binary male and female.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with that. I don't think that even if there were true hermaphroditic cases or hermaphroditic cases where both gametes are existing in the same species, which I think is incredibly rare, but I think it has happened a few times in humans, even that doesn't necessarily refute the binary. I guess just from an ontological sense, saying like biological truth, I feel like gives way more philosophical weight to a scientist than they ever should have, right? To be able to define like, well, what is a true feature? Like, do trees exist separate from leaves, separate from the ground? Does, can any collection of matter be defined as a thing? This is a very boring like epistemic metaphysics question, but yeah, that's the only thing I would be uncomfortable saying that like this is a biological truth. And it's like, I mean, insofar as this is our system of biology, I guess, yeah.
So would I. I would just say this is our best explanation of how it is that, organisms happen to reproduce, is the male and female. Now, we are biological entities, but that is not the most important part about us. The most important part about us is not whether or not we have a male or female brain or male or female genitalia, but the mind that we have. And the mind is an asexual thing. In principle, in some distant future, this mind that runs on our brain could be downloaded onto a computer somewhere, and the computer would have no gender. And in fact, AGI would have no gender. So therefore, minds have no gender.
Okay, I'm liking what he's saying just because I'm a weirdo, and I do believe that eventually we'll just be in computers and a lot of these things won't matter. So let me know what you guys think about this whole the mind is asexual. I've never really thought about that, which maybe means I agree with it. So first question, I mean, obviously, if you want to comment on anything else I said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section.
They do not have a sex. You're infinitely elastic to choose your gender expression because of the way in which our mind works. Granted that brains may very well be able to be distinguished as male or female once you put in an MRI, but we are not brains, we're minds.
I feel like you get into really weird, I guess it depends on how you're viewing the mind-brain distinction there, because then my next question, I would just go organ through organ. Maybe I could very easily ask, is a penis a male or female thing? And maybe we could gender that as male, but if I were to say, is there such thing as a female or a male arm or a heart or any other part of the body? I feel like,
I suppose you could possibly identify in the same way, or a similar way that you identify a brain as being either male or female by looking at the MRI. You could say, the heart actually belongs to a male because if you drill down into the cells, you'd see that there are XY chromosomes there indicating a male or just YY chromosomes inside of the. Yeah, this idea that the brain and the mind are different is basically a law of physics. That's computational universality, that the brain is the hardware and the mind is the software running on the brain.
Can I push back on that?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so the thing is that the way the brain is set up chemically and the way it is structured, that affects how the mind works, right?
In fact, no. It's a common misconception. You do have different sensations and feelings depending upon the kinds of hormones that you have, but that will not determine your thoughts or behaviours. You will always have a choice. I might very well wake up with, a whole...
Okay, so I had to speak on this one just because I've spoken to many people, so they already know what I'm going to say. So I had to posit that I kind of am in the belief that we have a conception of free will that really isn't free will. It is something that evolution has created to make us believe we have free will. I think eventually we'll have a lot of information and research on how this is probably true, and it starts from what the younger person said, that chemicals. So every chemical in your brain is kind of dictating how you're going to react and be and everything you're going to do. And there's so many there's so many ways we make choices. And if you just dig down deep into it, you have no control at the very beginning, which means you really have no control at the very end when you make the action or choose to do the action. So this is interesting to me. Let's see what else they say.
A lot of testosterone running through me and feel more aggressive, but that doesn't mean I will be aggressive.
Well,
I
naturally, but-
choose.
Wait a second. I got a big question about that. Wait, you think that you can make choices independent of the physical reality of the mind?
I think that's sort of
So I think what he's getting at, and what I would agree with, and I don't know if you're religious or not, so that might influence this as well. So I would view the mind is completely an abstraction of the underlying stuff in the brain. So if you change the underlying stuff in the brain, the mind necessarily will change as well. But you disagree with that, or?
No, that's fine. But of course, we are minds, and so we have ideas, we generate ideas, but I like to say we're not identical to any of our ideas, and we can choose amongst them. I endorse free will. I think that we can create new explanations, bring new
Where
options.
does that free will, how ultimately would you choose if not by relying on some brain state? Where is the choice? Where does that free will, how ultimately would you choose if not by relying on some brain state? Where is the choice coming from, I guess?
The choice, it's the wrong level of analysis. So if we start to talk about the brain, then we're in the realm of neuroscience rather than the realm of something like psychology or philosophy, and the correct level of analysis would be the mental state, the mind.
He wanted to push back.
Okay.
Yeah. So if, say, someone had a psychotic disorder, would knowing that they had a psychotic disorder and saying, well, I don't want to have that anymore, would that change the fact that they have a psychotic disorder? No. I mean, the way that their brain is set up, the way that there are chemical imbalances in their brain, they would need to be medicated for that to actually be changed. They can't just think, I'm going to get better. So, yes, the way I agree with Destiny on this, the mind is separate from the brain, but the way the mind works and what it is because of how the brain is. It can't be detached.
No, I agree. It's a similar argument to the way in which a flight simulator works depends to some extent, or depends to a large extent, upon what's going on with the hardware. Yes, of course. And so when you say, well, if you take some sort of antipsychotic in order to not be psychotic anymore, yeah, that is a choice that you would yourself make. And so you can't get outside of this realm of choice, even if you're choosing to take a medication which is going to help you make different choices in the future, namely not psychotic ones.
I guess the big issue, though, is where does the initial choice, all of these things are predetermined by the physical state of the brain, no?
Oh, physical state of the universe. Yeah, I don't think that there is a contradiction between physical determinism and free will. I'm a compatibilist of a kind.
Okay, so let's talk functionally. So you can say, yes, self-identification doesn't matter in terms of trans issues, but if a person has medically transitioned, it can get complicated, but if you're a trans person, you didn't know they were a trans woman, let's say, don't you think that they have transitioned in some way to being a woman? Like
I think that,
femaleness?
yeah, I would grant, for example, I was having this discussion the other day, that this person who presents as a woman and looks for all the world like a woman should be granted all the rights and privileges of being a woman, for example. I would use their pronouns or whatever it happens to be. However, that wouldn't change the scientific fact that they still have XY chromosomes and are technically biologically a male.
But why does that matter?
It doesn't matter, except if you're interested in something like scientific truth or good explanations in science. So it's the same as you can dress up your cat like a dog all you like, but it's still going to be a cat at the end of the day.
So in terms of scientific truth, do you think that trans people don't know that they were born as the sex that they were? Do you think they're just fundamentally disputing that?
No, of course not. Like, as I say, a trans person, people are either male or female except for these small edge cases. That's the biological reality.
Okay.
Now, how they choose to express themselves in terms of their gender.
I mean, I can get his point. He's also saying at the end of the day, it doesn't matter socially. He is just speaking on, if we're just going to sit here and talk about science, then that is what our science says, even though it's just words. And I think he means it more in a natural way. Like, I don't think animals are walking around calling themselves males or females. They just have their genetics that tell them what to do, right? And we as humans have come up with the names of male, female, but it's really just nature being nature. And I think that's kind of where he's leaning towards. Let me know if you think I'm wrong.
That is a feature of the mind which, as I say, may as well be regarded as asexual. There's no male or female mind, even if there are male and female brains.
Okay, so even if they're, I'd actually like to talk to you about that in terms of the brain, in terms of the brain structure. So there was a study done that found that the brains of trans women, almost 100% of the time, were identified as the same as a cis woman's brain, and the brains of trans men, almost 100% of the time, were identified as the same as a cis man's brain. This was sometimes before the age of 12. It was so accurate that they could predict later gender dysphoria or transgender identity. And it was also found that even if a person had had no access to HRT, or if they hadn't medically transitioned, their brain was still the same. Like if there were a trans man that didn't transition, their brain would still be identified as like a male brain. Don't you think that that has any effect then on whether or not like that they have of them being biologically male? It's a biological feature.
I'm not sure what the point there is. So yes, I can grant you that there are some people who might present in a female way that have a male brain or something like that. You can do these brain scans and use the brain scan in order to determine what the sex of that particular brain is, or the sex of that particular person is. But again, I'm granting the fact that regardless of what your brain is, absolutely regardless of what your brain is, all brains are capable of basically doing the same thing, of having an experience of learning physics, having an experience of being an artist, having an experience of being feminine to some extent, masculine to some extent, or in fact entirely masculine or entirely feminine, regardless of what your brain happens to be.
Okay, so if you agree that you would respect a trans woman's like pronouns, whatever, if you agree that that being intersex is an edge case, then why do you strongly agree that women needs to be defended from gender ideology?
Oh, well, that's a separate issue altogether.
Oh,
we moved on from that.
Biological. Oh, yeah, biological. Sorry.
Yeah. So again, there's a difference between the scientific fact of the matter of there being.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought that up, because if you don't realize, they did change what they're talking about. It has transitioned over to like just the biological part of it, and not the previous discussion as well. I'm actually liking almost everything this guy's saying. Maybe it's the accent, I don't know. But if you've ever spoken to me, I've kind of said these kind of things, so I'm actually agreeing with it. Let's keep going.
Two sexes, no matter what the animal happens to be. Kangaroos are either male or female. Even if there are intersex kangaroos, it doesn't change the fact.
From Australia. Kangaroos, like not like, you know, goats or anything.
To pose a question, person has XXY chromosomes, mixed genitalia.
Yes.
Male or female?
It entirely depends upon whether or not they're able to have offspring, and if they produce sperm.
They produce neither sperm nor eggs.
Again, I can grant you the existence of the edge case middle ground intersex, but that does not refute the idea that animals, sexually reproducing animals, are male or female.
Doesn't any existence of an exception to the rule mean that the rule doesn't exist?
Of course, that's a very good philosophical problem. Exceptions to rules prove there must be a rule. The rule exists, and therefore there are exceptions to the rule.
How so? If there's something that doesn't fit the rule, if you said there's only zeros and ones and there's a 2, then, well, I mean, zeros and ones are still the only thing that exists except for this 2, but we'll just put that away. We don't need to think about that. Any exception to the rule means it's not a rule.
I think the point on this one is he is saying outliers don't really matter. When he says rule, he means like a general consensus on a fact, right? What's a good example? Maybe like most planets, right, are actually gas planets, I believe, and that is still a rule, even though there's planets like this, or maybe I should say most planets actually are uninhabitable, right? And then you have this planet, right? The rule still would be most planets are not habitable. And just because you find one does not change the rule. That's kind of what I'm getting on this. Let me know if I'm wrong. I could be off on this. So help me out if you can.
No, that's not the way that the rules work. You could have, for example, there exist in the world tigers and lions, and they're two distinct things. However, a tiger can mate with a lion, and you can get tigons and ligers. Those things exist, but that does not refute the existence of tigers and lions. And in the same way, you can have males and females, and that's a biological rule. There exist these things called males and females, which are required for our species to reproduce. And if they didn't exist, if there were no such thing as these two different sexes, you wouldn't have a continuation of the species. So the mere fact that there are some people who can't reproduce, who have different sets of chromosomes, or who don't produce sperm and egg, or produce both, or whatever, doesn't change the fact that you have male and female as a biological reality. But that has nothing to do with the mind and whether or not people mentally can identify, if they're in a male body, as a female or vice versa.
Okay, so you agree that there's males and females, but once again, if a person, that edge case, if you say there's only two, then where do they fit? Where do they fit into the two?
They don't fit into the two, but it doesn't deny the fact that there are two boxes. And you've got these two categories.
Do the other people just float around the boxes?
I think the question is, like, definitionally, wouldn't there need to be a third box then?
Yeah.
For intersex?
You can have a third box if you like, but
well, that means there's not just two. That means there's not just two sexes.
What's our claim again?
If there are only two sexes, male and female.
It is biological truth
Okay,
that there are only two sexes, male and female.
That if you want to really push me on that, I would say, well, that's a non-sex. It's not a sex because those people in general, I suppose, cannot reproduce. Be like a mule or something.
I would say, I guess, like, the reason why I'm neutral on this and why I don't enjoy this conversation is because I feel like there isn't very much pursuit of any type of ontological truth about the category of male or female. I think that this conversation is 100% held hostage by people that want to go on and make social arguments about it. So who should be allowed to participate in sports, who should be allowed to whatever. And because those arguments are best if you can source them from some sort of scientific.
Yeah, he's perfectly saying kind of what I believe I said earlier is there's usually an agenda with people that care about this so much. I have an opinion on it, but I don't care. It does not affect my everyday life. I have daughters, I have sons, and this does not affect me at all. So it's not like I'm someone out here that doesn't have children, that doesn't really have a stake in this or whatever. But I believe most people that care so much about this usually have another agenda. Unfortunately, it's usually just religious. And I think Destiny here is, if you don't know that is Destiny, I think he's about to kind of say this exact thing as well.
Foundation, people are like, oh, well, I want to argue the science now about this.
So I was going to ask, isn't the way that people answer that question more ideological than scientific?
Yeah, but people try to, people do the same thing with history. If you look at Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, people like to argue, well, historically, this happened, and then it gives them justification for their current actions. But if you go to Russia and Ukraine, they'll give you two different histories. If you go to Israel, Palestine, they'll give you two different histories. If you talk to pro-trans and anti-trans people, they'll give you two different scientific definitions, because people would rather, if you can source your things scientifically, you don't have to argue the social part. But the reality is I just don't think they should be connected. Like, we could imagine a world where 1% of women have spikes that come out of their wrists. We wouldn't let these women participate in any combat sport because they'd be killing people. It doesn't matter if they're women or not, we just wouldn't. They'd have an unfair advantage. Much the same, we could acknowledge that, we could say, okay, well, trans women are real, but because of the bodies they've been born into and the advantages granted thereof, we probably just wouldn't let them compete in sports with non-trans people. The same way that if you're a fifth grader who's been held back 15 years, you're not gonna be on the same sports team as my son playing soccer. That's just not gonna happen, right? So I don't like the arguments that are rooted in history or in scientific fact to establish these truths, because people are doing that because they don't want to have the more difficult sociological or the social argument, I think.
It depends on where you're starting.
I'll give you last word.
I was just saying, if we're immediately when I see the prompt, I'm automatically put in a scientific mindset. So I think to myself, well, if what we're talking about is just trying to explain how it is that we human beings exist. Well, we human beings exist because males mate with females, and that's how reproduction works. And so, again, if you want to have the third category and say there exists this third category as a scientific fact, well, fair enough, but it doesn't deny the explanation. There is a scientific explanation which involves these two sexes.
All right, and that was the end of that one. I did enjoy that. I do enjoy this kind of format. Eventually I want to get to a point to where I can maybe have a conversation with people while reacting to these things, but we'll get there. Let me know if you guys do like this, and if you do, the only way for me to make more of these is for you guys to kind of engage and comment. I have noticed that most of the people that watch my stuff are not subscribed, but I think that's normal. So if you can, give me a like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how you feel about this exact topic or these topics. There was 2 in 1, basically. It was 1, but kind of 2 rolled into 1. So let me know what you think. Comment below. I will respond because I like to. Thank you guys for watching. Somebody's got to do it. Peace.